Welcome to this Taking the Myth edition of the Night Tube. I'm Stephen Knight. I have an incredible episode lined up for you, so I'm going to make this brief. My partner in crime, the excellent Iram Ramzan, will be, of course, joining me as co-host. But for the first time, we are doing our myth-taking in the visual format. Ears just weren't enough. We want it all, basically. So if you're listening to this on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, etc., you can head over to youtube.com/gspellchecker and see our beautiful faces. And it's an extra special edition of the show because we are going to be joined by an absolute titan of TV and radio and a thoroughly good bloke, Nicky Campbell. Nicky has plenty going on in terms of projects and shows that he's involved in. So many people know him for different reasons, but regular listeners of this show will know Iram and I have a special fondness for the BBC's Big Questions. That's where I met Iram, in fact. It brought us together, and I know many of you have enjoyed getting up early on a Sunday morning to watch the Big Questions too. Sometimes it took almost everything not to throw your morning cup of coffee at the telly, in light of some of the liberal fanaticism spilling out of the mouth of a guest or two. Other times, we laughed and cheered on as a champion of reason nailed a killer blow. Rhetorically, of course. But whatever you thought of the show, I think we can all agree that the glue that held it all together, the only reason it worked, was its host, Nicky Campbell. I think I've described him as a conductor of a massively dysfunctional orchestra. It shouldn't have worked really, but he made it work. And now it's over. It's finished after 250 glorious episodes. So who better to look back on the show's legacy than the man himself? We get into so much good stuff on this episode. It was amazing fun. Nicky was fantastic. Iram was on top form as usual. So be sure to send Nicky some love. His Twitter handle is in the show notes, but he can be found on Twitter at Nicky A.A. Campbell. Send him some love. Send him some kind words. Maybe check out his podcast too. He's had some amazing guests of late. Or have a look at some of the awareness he spreads around animal rights. I know that's very close to his heart. But enjoy the show. Leave a comment. Share it about a bit. Let me know what you think. And now bring you Taking the Myth with Nicky Campbell. Welcome to Taking the Myth, your topical, skeptical discussion show. I'm Stephen Knight, and joining me as the best co-host in town, it's Iram Ramzan. Hey Iram, how you doing?
I'm good, thank you very much.
I am very excited this week. We've got an extra special guest, a legend of radio and TV, a man of seemingly infinite cool and patience. It's only Nicky Campbell. Nicky, how you doing?
The long intro, I was getting a bit impatient. Yeah. Great. And, it's great to talk about big questions, memories. Yeah. Because I know you were both great devotees, would be putting it a bit strongly, but you followed it with
brought us together.
Yeah.
That's why we're here. It's thanks to you.
I met Iram at a recording of the Big Question, so this essentially is all your fault.
It is. It's thanks to you that you unleashed us on the world. You have a lot to answer for.
Yeah. I remember seeing you both in the audience at different times, and you, Iram, specifically, I remember seeing you, and you had that look of, what the fuck is going on around me?
My face. My face is a pride button.
I remember it. But it was, we did close on 900 debates.
Wow.
And they've cancelled it is the word of the moment. That's fine. I never thought we'd last 14 years, frankly. But it's quite expensive.
Is it cancelled after 11 seasons, though? I mean, 11 seasons and then you cancelled. It's not...
No, it's not like...
You had a pilot or a season and it didn't work out. I mean, 11 seasons is more than most things get, I would imagine.
I did a game show called For the Rest of Your Life that lasted a week.
Yeah, I've got several questions about that, actually.
But it's very expensive to make. I think that's the thing. And also, it was quite abrasive, I think.
Especially the carpet towards the end.
Indeed so. Or that time on a Sunday morning. But I did want to have a show that I knew would be the last show. So that I could, there's a film, isn't there, with Peter Finch from many years ago that he's a newscaster and he goes bonkers and he says exactly what he thinks.
Is it Network?
Yeah. And I wanted to just at some stage in that last debate, I wanted to say to somebody, you do know you are talking utter bollocks. But I didn't get the opportunity. It would have been such a blaze of glory. I'm not.
How many times have you relived this in the shower since?
Many times.
So, 11 seasons. That is one hell of a run.
More than that, I think.
Is it longer than that?
Yeah, it's 14 years.
Have my researcher flogged, which is me.
Yeah.
But so maybe you can explain what happened there, because many of my listeners are not from the UK, but I did notice a number from across the pond used to join into my tweet along on the, commentary on Sundays. They'd get up and they'd try and find a way of accessing the BBC.
It's the only thing that got me up on a Sunday morning.
Exactly. So if for those that don't know, it's a topical discussion show in the UK, debate format, very fiery at times, very testy. You had a lot of ideological views represented on there, always reasonably balanced out.
That's only just when you were on it.
Yeah, a lot to answer for. So, Nicky, what happened? How were you approached to be told that we wouldn't get another season?
Oh, that happens all the time. They just said, it's a tough decision. We're not going to renew it. And the big plus for me, obviously I'll miss it, but the big plus for me is it took me away because it was in a different place every weekend. So I had to leave on a Saturday morning, come back basically on a Sunday afternoon, Sunday evening. So I had a wiped weekend for 10 weeks, and before that for 20 weeks. And I think we did one season was a 40-week season. So it was exacting, and it was pulling on all resources. And I've got a load of other stuff, and it was difficult fitting that in. So that was a massive upside. Obviously, I'm going to miss it. I'm going to miss it. I'd still do debates, of course, all the time, but I'm going to miss that particular. It was unique. We had some incredible debates on, and as you know, you both have an interest in faith and religion. And, respecting the faithful is completely different from respecting faith, which, nobody's going to tell me to respect L. Ron Hubbard, And we engaged with all that stuff, and it was brilliant. We took people out of their, terrible phrase, comfort zones. We took people out of their silos, and many religious people had to confront their own beliefs, in a sense, and they were put in a certain context because other people were questioning them, and they were often not uncomfortable with that. Merely asking a question was enough to enrage some. How dare you ask that question? Don't be worried about the question, mate. You should just be thinking about what the answer to the question is. So it encapsulated all the things that I know drive both of you mad on Twitter: the illogicality and the irrationality, and the lack of listening to other people's points of view. I like listening to other people's points of view. I like listening to people who don't agree with me and with whom I do not agree. And I just think, for me, the uniqueness of the big questions and the kind of, the casts of characters we had and all the different beliefs on display was one time in the green room where everyone congregates and has a coffee and a biscuit and a sandwich before going out, as you know, onto the show, on all the guests. And there was a evangelical literalist Christian that we used to have called Mark Mullins. We used to have him a lot. Utterly charming man. Other stuff going on as well. I mean, beliefs, the literalist beliefs. And we had him there sitting on a sofa beside a Satanist.
Excellent.
And I just thought, this for me this is living all right. I said, this is brilliant. And they were chatting with each other, both having a cup of tea. And of course, a Satanist to Mark Mullins is a Satanist. And it was just brilliant. Seeing a Satanist and an evangelical literalist Christian be civilized with each other in the green room over a cup of tea. He wasn't, there's a big schism in Satanism.
Is there? What, like Sunni and Shias?
sectarian Satanists now. So I suppose you've got is it a split between people who literally believe in Satan and those who just think the sort of hedonist lifestyle?
Absolutely. Nailed it. Those who literally believe in the corporeal form of Satan and he who must be obeyed, and those who just, want to party. Do what thou wilt. That's the Aleister Crowley thing, isn't it? People who just want to go out there and have their own framework of morality. That's fine. That's, I'm not saying it's fine, but I'm saying that you absolutely, your stuff here. The big schism in Satanism.
Hashtag big schism. Be careful how you spell that, I
So
suppose.
speaking of guests, I'm going to ask you about one in particular, Nicky.
Yeah. Is it Anjem Choudhary or is it Tommy Robinson? Which is it?
It's neither, actually. Although I would be interested in going back to those two later on. But there was one guest in particular that was a bit controversial. He was a man of many talents. He was a lawyer. It wasn't you, Stephen.
Okay.
He was a lawyer. He was a human rights activist, a women's rights activist, a feminist, queen of the universe. No, I'm talking about Mo Ansar.
Well,
this is somebody who just popped on our screens. I think it was the big questions he first appeared on. This man who seemed to be very moderate at the time when we were looking for these quote unquote moderate Muslims, and then appears Mo Ansar out of nowhere to debate against, I think it was Tommy Robinson of the EDL.
Well, he was on before that. I think the first time he appeared was in Southampton. But yes, extraordinary. I mean, you'll both know that there have been near academic papers written by Jamie Bartlett wrote about it as well. And I think Nick Cohen wrote about it,
yeah.
And others wrote about it. The extraordinary platform that social media, an opportunity that social media afforded people to actually invent themselves or to invent a persona.
Yeah.
And he claimed to be, all things to everybody, all kinds of everything. And I mean, his CV was extraordinary. He could have, if he'd kept it going, if he hadn't blown it and, called the police on Ian Dale when Ian Dale swore at him on Twitter. If he hadn't, he could have kept it going because he was, he could have kept that ball rolling, but something inside, there was a kind of self-destruct button. First time he appeared was in Southampton. And
that's where he's from, yeah.
He's the Muslim bishop of Southampton.
That was one of the things. But some people call him Sheikh, right? And so he did appear, and I didn't go to him. And he complained. And I thought, oh, well, maybe I felt all sort of liberal guilty about not going to him. Maybe I should have gone to him. And he complained quite strongly. We had him back, and then I went to him, and I felt a bit better about it. But I think that particular moment possibly epitomized his entire career. He just benefit of the doubt.
That's really interesting. I mean, just conversely, when I was first on the show as a guest, I spent the first 20 minutes trying not to be sick in my own mouth and actually dreading you coming to me for a question. It was a lovely experience in hindsight, but I suppose that's the difference from somebody who just wants to be heard, isn't it? Somebody who wants to be the centre of attention, somebody who wants to be known for being known. Not seen much of him recently, strangely. I don't know what's
he joined a band last I heard. He was singing in a band and having marital problems.
Well, I mean, one wouldn't wish those on anyone, but I think that
especially the band.
But I think that he was very presentable. He was very plausible. He presented himself well. He's a clever guy.
Yeah.
I just think something imploded. But the big pattern of it all, the big lesson is, how people can use social media. And also it's our fault as media people, as researchers, as producers. We're looking for an easy fix, right? We're looking who can come on, who can say that, who will be able to say that, one half of the argument, the other half of the argument. Well, that guy, he's on Twitter, he's made himself, because everyone's on the media is on Twitter, so they see this guy all the time being retweeted and engaged with by the Reverend Richard Coles and all sorts of other people. Get that guy on. And then it's self-perpetuating, isn't it? Yeah. It happens on his level, the Mo Ansar level, but it happens on all sorts of other levels as well. So you think that person is the definitive go-to, but there are possibly many more who aren't so visible.
It's probably important to point out the significance of the BBC and how much they lean on impartiality. And I think there's this perception that people in your position severely have your wings clipped. I mean, obviously the journalistic part of yourself that wants to be objective, wants to give a balanced debate, but you're also an intelligent, opinionated person as well, who quite clearly has a lot to say about the issues every week. First of all, what sort of restrictions are placed on you, and how do you personally train yourself to rein that in, to actually bite your tongue? I mean, you spoke about having this fantasy of just unloading on the last episode. I imagine that little devil sits on your shoulder all the time.
Yeah, especially when I'm doing, radio work and BBC work. This is slightly different. There are certain things here there's certain places you can go when you're talking about faith and belief and having those sorts of debates. But you take a different attitude into the studio with you, and it's a kind of professional pride about having a good debate, having a good argument, or as we say in the business, having a bloody good row, getting something out of it, having some enlightenment, having some insight. That's what you want to create, and so you do that, and you kind of pride yourself on being impartial. I know people who are, who I work with who are Corbynistas. I know people who would support right the other wing, who would support the Brexit Party and UKIP. I think who I work with, and they no fear or favor. I've seen both of them being brilliant and their producers constructing interviews to demolish their own arguments. I think that is just a professional pride. And it's a bit of a myth that you appoint somebody and they've done some tweets on the left or some tweets on the right. How can they possibly do their job properly? That's not how it works. But also creationism, for example, which we focused on quite a lot because we focused on literalism, which I find fascinating. I find, Christian literalism utterly fascinating. That mindset, the cognitive dissonance of it all. I don't need to be impartial about creationism. I don't need to be impartial about climate change. The only place where it's seriously debated creationism, we never did or is it 6,000 years old? Did we, really? Are we, as Christopher Hitchens' memorable phrase, do we share kinship with the animals? Yes or no? No, we don't do that. We're beyond that. That's just stupid.
Yeah.
So what we did with things like, should addressing the problem of creationism being taught in schools under the guise of religious studies, but sneaking into science or literalism or this, has science disproved God or this, all that stuff. They were part of that debate. And the only place they have that debate about literalism is Northern Ireland. That's the only place they have it. It's just kind of stupid, but kind of understandable. But I remember, turning to some guy and saying, so, do you really think that Lot's wife turned into a pillar of salt on that? He said, well, something happened on that day. Something happened. And I remember thinking, well, that's undoubtedly true, but it wasn't his wife turning into a bar of salt. I was going to say a bar of soap.
Have you ever seen his wife and a pillar of salt in the same room?
Exactly. But he's Lot's the guy who got his daughters got him drunk so they could have sex with him and propagate the species, right? That's the guy.
Yeah. So I think he's one of the biggest reasons homophobia runs through the sort of literalist Christian interpretation. Yeah. So this idea of literalism, like you've said, I think it's fascinating as well. And the show really did endeavor to bring all these people together in the same room. You have a lot of extreme views in a sense, and I suppose I've always been fascinated as to whether or not it's ever nearly come to blows before or after in the green room, post biscuit, whether there's been any bad blood or anything that people might need separating.
I think it's not the custard creams.
I think it's apart from the Satanist and the literalist Christian really getting on quite well. I don't think so. What I have seen is actually, I'll tell you what was a feisty old affair afterwards. And this is another interesting point. I think we did a debate a few years ago. Can there be a British Islam, or is there a British Islam, or should there be a British Islam? I can't remember what the title was. If you did that debate now, people would say, how dare you do that debate? And then that's only like 6-7 years ago. It's interesting. It's like the burqa debate. We did lots of those. If you did it now, people would say you were being Islamophobic, although you're merely expressing the opinion that many Muslims have about the burqa. That's another issue. But so we had an entire front row and guests who were Muslim, but of course they all said that the others weren't real Muslims, because it's always, we had ex-Muslims as well.
Yeah.
But the Ahmadiyya, obviously, and we had every strain with the people who were working with Quilliam. I think it was Adam Dean who was on. and all sorts. And, and at that was an explosion after, with the MPAC, the Muslim Public Affairs Committee, all sorts of weird and wonderful and not very wonderful people. And that was a right kickoff in hospitality afterwards. Just shouting at each other. And it's because you're not a real Muslim, I'm a real Muslim, you're not a real Muslim, and I thought that inherently is a bit of a problem here, and it's really, really interesting. And that MP, it was in
Salma
Bradford.
Yaqub?
No, I like Salma. But there's an
Naz
No, yeah, Naz Shah. The MP for Bradford, because the debate was in Bradford.
Yeah, it would have been Naz Shah. Yeah.
And I said to this on the radio, I said, the people who would be classified as fringe Islamists, the sort of people I'm talking about, they talk a good game, but you scratch under the surface and find out what they really think. And it some of it's, cause for discomfort. She was like cozying up to them and shunning the more so-called moderate people. And I thought that was interesting. And I said that to her on the radio. I said, well, the big questions, you didn't have much time for people who were perhaps characterized as moderate, and you cozying up to them. And, I just thought I'd say that because, but that was that kicked off. But no, it's quite civilized. Yeah. I think the best debate we did, and I thought you'd ask me this, so I thought about it, but you haven't asked me it, and you probably weren't going to ask me it.
Who were? You just preempted that, yeah.
Yeah, all right.
I wanted to know about your best and worst debates ever.
Yeah, oh God. But
ones with Stephen would be the worst.
Do pets go to heaven?
Was that the best one or the worst?
It was one of our biggest raters. I really enjoyed it. You have to be really stupid to not think that is a brilliant debate. It works on so many levels.
Yeah, I mean, it's absurd.
It's multi-dimensional.
It's absurd, but if it's absurd for pets, it's absurd for everything.
There's that.
Yeah.
There's how we treat animals.
Yeah.
How we view animals not having souls or having souls. What is a soul? What is heaven? Does heaven exist? There's so many levels to it. What kind of if you have animals there, what do they eat? Oh, if they haven't been a good boy, do they go to hell? Yeah,
that's another one. Yeah, there's hours in this.
Devil dogs.
Yeah,
they didn't touch the stick. They're going to hell.
But there have been many brilliant debates. But back to the Christian literalists, the way they anthropomorphize God, and many do, is just extraordinary, isn't it? The 6,000 year thing is, well, why would God hang around? And but Ibrahim Mogra from the Muslim Council of Britain describing human beings as God's greatest achievement. Like it's, oh, well done, God. That's fantastic. You've done really well. Yeah, I mean, dolphins not quite so good, but humans, fantastic. The anthropomorphization of I find really interesting as well, of God by human beings. It's not Sapathis understanding. It's just within my realm of understanding, so I can get my head around it. I interviewed actually Ibrahim, but for a book I wanted to write, but never got around to writing, about religion and heaven and hell. And I asked him all about heaven, and I took some. I'll read some of it out to you later on.
Oh, great!
He's Muslim Council of Britain.
Yeah,
his view of heaven and what happens in heaven.
And is this very specific? I've always wanted an instruction manual of sorts.
You want some of it now?
Yes, I'd love to.
Right. I like Ibrahim. He's a Liverpool supporter. He's a very, very charming man.
Don't like him already.
So,
He's interfaith. There's loads of interfaith stuff. He's Muslim Council of Britain. He's pious, if you like that sort of thing. But this is a scratch the surface thing. What do you actually believe about heaven? So I said, if you go to heaven, surely every Muslim will be desperate to meet the Prophet. That's the thing, isn't it? Your Prophet has, Iram, the Prophet is everything. The Prophet is more cherished than your own family members. We hear all that all the time.
We heard that from prominent commentators.
You want to get there to meet the Prophet. And Ibrahim said, this is interesting. I'm not mocking. I'm just saying this is interesting. That's the hope of all those who hope to go to heaven. They'll be given a drink at the pond of shelter, which is a special pond, the water source of heaven in which Muhammad will give water. And they'll never be thirsty ever again. If they drink after that, it will just be for pleasure, not to quench their thirst. And those who take care of orphans will be neighbors of Muhammad in heaven. They'll be in his neighborhood. And it's the most desirable residences will be around Muhammad. And if you've looked after orphans, you'll be in that postcode essentially, although he doesn't use that word postcode. And I said, will there be a queue to meet him? And he said, well, we cannot imagine or compare the system of heaven with the worldly system of queuing. In heaven, because of the nature of how heaven is, no one will be inconvenienced by having to queue. There'll be some kind of way in which people will be able to meet and greet him without having to queue. I'm like seeing a wedding line, right? Or like a meet and greet, or like one of those authors who goes into Waterstones and signs books or something like that. But anyway, I just find this stuff fascinating. The sense of time and time span is not the 60-second, 60-minute, 24-hour day one. So even if people queue up, it will seem like they've been there for a few moments rather than an hour. Just one more? Do you want one more bit?
Yes.
You love this stuff, don't you? You love this stuff.
I am fascinated.
As much as I do, right? Will you be having sexual intercourse with your wife in heaven? Right.
Okay.
The belief is that there will be damsels, ladies in heaven. Men will have multiple numbers of women and they can be intimate with them. But your wife will be the queen of all the other ladies in the household. And the aspect of jealousy that might occur on the earth will all be removed, unlike in this world.
So, yeah, two quick thoughts here. So, I suppose as a pro, it's very specific. The specificity of it is fantastic. Usually it's very vague and you can't pin these people down. So, I appreciate that. Second point, that welcome drink would clearly be non-alcoholic. So, I'm out.
I think.
And also, can I just say, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I know you're a damsel in distress now that I've interrupted you, but for me, you're the queen of all the damsels. But basically, I like being thirsty.
That is just going to be the quote for the podcast, Nicky Campbell. I like being thirsty.
But don't you?
Yeah, well, it's the relief of having some liquid.
I mean, if there is relief, right? If there is a relief in the other sense of having the damsels, but your wife is the queen of all, so you can have intimate pleasure, that's a form of relief, right? So why not the relief of thirst, quenching your thirst, slaking your thirst? It's a great feeling, isn't it?
I agree.
Can I ask? Right. So I actually did have questions about Islamic heaven when I used to go to mosque, and I think I was about 9 or 10 years old, and the woman in the mosque was talking about.
She's using a quiet voice because she's at home. I can tell.
Once a Catholic.
So the woman did discuss heaven, just as Ibrahim Mogra did. He was talking about how men would have damsels and the wife would just have the husband. And there's 10-year-old me asking the woman in the mosque, but why is it that women just get one man and they get so many women? That doesn't seem fair. And she said, oh, it might seem unfair to us on earth, but once we'll be in heaven, we won't think like that anymore. We won't feel jealous. And I said, right. That still seems unfair, and she just like shooed me away. Stop asking questions.
Interesting. There's no hashtag Me Too in heaven.
I just could not get my head around that, to be honest with you, and nobody was able to answer that question satisfactorily.
Yeah, because I said to my friend Osama Hassan, I ran some of this stuff by him, and Osama said, "Well, these are very good questions." Osama is devout. I spoke to him recently. These are very good questions, and these are questions that people just do not ask because they don't feel able to. But good on you for asking that question.
Age 10, so
age 10 years old. And who are these damsels? Who are they? Are they holograms? Are they real people who lived once and are in heaven, or are they specifically hired for the purpose of heavenly intimacy? Or Any thoughts?
Well, apparently they're supposed to be very young virgin maidens, basically, who will remain virgins even after you have sex with them. I don't know how that works, but that's apparently that's it.
The
That's who
obsession
these
with
girls are.
virginity, the obsession with virginity throughout the scriptures, without the people of the book, or the people of, with all the monotheistic religions. I've got one more actually.
Go for it. This is great.
From Ibrahim. Now you've got to remind that people at Archbishop of Canterbury and all that, they stand with Ibrahim in interfaith stuff. And I do not mean to be discourteous. This is what he believes. And maybe some of your viewers and listeners will concur with him. But I'm just saying what is interesting, and I know you know where I'm coming from, both of you. What is interesting is that you don't hear this stuff a lot. You don't hear what they, and I think the Big Questions was a kind of forum for that. You don't hear what they do actually really believe. You just take it on the surface. Getting underneath it is really, really interesting. I asked him if, basically, I didn't think I put it like this, but, do you shit in heaven?
Asking the important question.
Really?
Because if you're drinking all that
You piss.
wine or something,
That's another thing.
where
I
will
want
it
to
go?
piss. I want to piss. I want to be thirsty. I want to have a nice cold one, non-alcoholic lager. There's some excellent non-alcoholic lagers now. And I want to have a great big horse piss, right? Because that's a great feeling.
I am with you on this. Sometimes a full bladder and a long journey is worth the pain just to get out the other side.
Oh,
Yeah. This took a very strange turn, hasn't it?
I'm not even going to comment on that.
Well, it has and it hasn't, because we're talking about theology. But it's not the normal theology that people talk about.
What did he say to that?
I've got it here. I've got it here in my hand.
Oh my God.
The point I'm making is that those who stand beside him do not realize that this is the actual belief, right? Because they don't. And similarly, they probably don't realize what the actual Catholic belief, if you dig into it, or the Calvinist belief, if you dig into it, which is, the chosen ones, extraordinary, or Mormons or whatever. That's what I find, and I know that you two find absolutely fascinating. Diving into this stuff. What do you actually believe? Let's get some detail here. Right. So he said, you'll have all normal bodily functions, but without the element of the body producing waste. The tradition talks about having a really hearty meal, but without the need to answer the call of nature. After the hearty meal, you simply burp and the food will be digested and a fragrant aroma will emanate from that person's mouth. And all the dirty, nasty things will not be present in heaven. So you burp basically with delight at the pleasure of having had that hearty meal, but it's a burp, a fragrant burp, a burp of fragrant aroma.
Why not a fragrant, flatulent effort? Why the burp, do you think? Why have they specifically chose that as more palatable than a bum toot? Is my question.
I think I know the answer to this.
Oh, this is great.
This is brand new information.
Have you heard it? You haven't heard of the aromatic burp?
I think this is, well, first, it's going on my list of potential band names after this. But no, definitely not.
Iram, have you heard any of this stuff? Abraham is a great theologian. He's a great theologian.
Oh my! Well, I mean, I'm no theologian, so at least I doff my cap to him. So I've never heard of the aromatic burp, but I think the reason why that bodily function was chosen is because in certain cultures, if you burp, it's a compliment to the chef who's made your food. It's suggesting that you've enjoyed the meal. So maybe that's why they chose the burp and not a fart, for example.
But yeah, it's an expression of content.
Yes.
And
See, there's logic in that.
Literally got to the bottom of that.
Burp. My compliments to the chef. That's the thing. Which does tend to suggest a lot of this is cultural, right? Doesn't it?
Yeah. It's funny because I think you've got
something divine in this.
Well, you've got. I think your fascination from literalism as well comes from the place of understanding whether or not people really believe these things. And I do feel, in terms of religion, and certainly as it gets to the fringes, there is a lack of empathy from the non-religious in the sense that they don't really believe that these people believe the things they say they do.
Exactly.
But I think, I mean, you'll be in a place to know better than most that they tend to affirm the beliefs daily, don't they? I mean, they don't act in a way that would suggest they are faking it or telling lies or putting on a persona.
No.
Or maybe some do.
I think maybe some people think it would be uncomfortable to explore what they actually do believe. I don't know. But the spectrum of Christianity is really interesting as well. And I have enormous respect for some people of faith. And I understand why. And I understand the quest for, I've chosen another way to try and work stuff out about how stuff works. I was going to say why we're here, but it's a kind of stupid question. But I have respect for that. And I think Hitchens said, if you're going to leave your wallet in a cab in New York City, fingers crossed it's a Muslim cab driver, because you'll get your wallet back,
That's interesting.
He said that. Christopher Hitchens said that. There's
Peace
a great
be upon him.
Yeah, exactly. I think some good people are maybe better people with faith. Just bad people can just be worse people and the worst people on earth through faith. But the spectrum of Christianity is interesting because we went from the literalists. Yes, Mark Mullins, I said earlier on, another ex-military man, absolute charming man. He'd be played by Nigel Havers in the story of his life. And I was talking about the ark with him. This stuff, baraminology, the thing about kinds.
Yes. Yeah.
That's interesting itself because, the kinds come off the ark and, then they evolved into microevolution. So you had a cat kind that evolved into, or a big cat kind that evolved into all the big cats and so forth. That's how it worked. Which means over 4,000 years, evolution was like at an incredible speed, and people would have seen it happening in front of their very eyes. But I asked him about marsupials because there's about 280 species of marsupial, most of which are in Australia. I think there's some in South America as well. I said, how did they get from the ark to, because you couldn't have evolved all those species of marsupials over 4,000 years, or if you did, as I say, it's like speed dating. You've seen it,
like an 80s montage.
Yeah, he said, they were being chased by prey, and so they all ran towards Australia. It's quite a long way, isn't it? That's the explanation. That is, in fact, the official explanation from the Discovery Center people in Texas or wherever it is in Kentucky who have the dinosaur museum.
I think he's the
all
chief
those people.
Proponent, yeah.
That is the official explanation of marsupials.
It's interesting because you don't often get a literal creationist interpretation, especially one that pertains to the ark as anything more than a metaphor. You don't usually get that out in the wild often. And every now and then when I do encounter it, throws me back a little bit. I'm not quite sure how to deal with it. And your example of them, I mean, your marsupial example is a perfect one, and obviously the time evolution takes, but you can tell they're not coming from a place of investigation because they will find a way not to acknowledge it but work around it. So they bring up this idea of kinds instead of animals 2 by 2, macro evolution versus micro, which is pretty much the same thing. It's just a difference in time. So
to take my point about if it's 4,000 years from the kinds into the extraordinary biodiversity that we have, all the different species, all the different types of big cat and cat and meerkat, and do you want me to go on? That happened in 4,000 years. It would have been in front of our very eyes, and animals would have been morphing in front of our very eyes, like some science fiction take. People believe this stuff.
Is this a failing of the ape human brain? This ability to comprehend large scales of time? I mean, I start to get foggy when I'm thinking about 3 weeks ago, and now I'm being told to perceive 250,000 years of human evolution or whatever it is. There's just no sort of mechanism in my brain to visualize that in any sort of competent manner, I don't think.
Yeah, these people, they're very comfortable with eternity, but they can't handle infinity.
That's clever.
It's true. But if you say, how long were the dinosaurs here? People say, oh, I don't know. But it's what? Is it, off the top of my, I can't remember. It's like 200 million years or something. 100, is it 180? Is it 220? Or is it 270? The figures just slipped by because I've been up since 3 o'clock this morning.
Bloody ages.
It's a long time. Think about that. Think about how long that, say it's 180 million years. Think about how long that is.
Oh.
It's gone.
I know. Our common ancestor with the chimp was like 6 million years ago, which is nothing. It's nothing in the great span of time. Of course, it's difficult to get your head around this stuff. And what's it been called? Complexity phobia.
That's a new one.
Yeah, it's a phrase for it, complexity phobia. It's just too much to try and get your head around, so you retreat into certainties and simplicities.
I mean, it's a product of our evolution as well. I mean, we've evolved to the ability to communicate and investigate things, but knowing we evolved how many hundreds of thousands of years ago, I'm not sure that helps us in any sort of evolutionary sense. And maybe that's one of the reasons our brain resists and imagines. I mean, there's some good reasons to believe we've evolved, to believe in a creator or a sort of father figure watching over us and looking out for us. Yeah. And, now we're breaking through our natural programming, for want of a better word, and we're coming up with some very uncomfortable dead ends mentally.
I think you can see it, both of you. I think you can see the embryo of our belief in the creator in certain so-called higher mammals. Because if you see, I have a great interest in animals and in conservation and a great passion for it. If you see elephants, they've got a massively developed brain and hypothalamus. And if you see elephants mourning a dead one, they literally do line up and they push the young forward to tenderly touch the dead with the trunk, and they kind of one by one, and they stroke the dead, and they really suffer with, grief. You can see, like, if they took a step further than that, they'd want to know that why, and they'd want to see that dead loved one again. You can see it comes from that crushing grief and that sadness and that why is that? They did an experiment on the Amboseli in Kenya whereby it's very cruel, but it's interesting, or callous is a better word, but they played on loudspeakers the call of the deceased matriarch, and the herd went crazy with confusion, distress, confusion, looking around, running around everywhere, not understanding what was going on. So it's that's a kind of beginning of that sense of mortality. And how do you deal with infant mortality? How do you deal with losing loved ones? It's not just trying to make sense of the world, it's trying to make sense of your sadness.
But speaking of creator,
this better be a good segue, Iram.
Did that make sense? All that stuff.
Devastating. Yeah.
Do you believe in a higher power? Do you believe in God, or do you have any faith?
No.
Straight out with it.
I was expecting something a little bit more, I don't know, drawn out and diplomatic. Well, but no, just straight out.
No, I believe the explanation of science is so much more majestic. As Darwin said in the final paragraph on The Origin of Species, there is grandeur in this view of life. There is so much grandeur and so much beauty and profundity. You don't have to play games with salamanders, evolving in front of our very eyes. You don't have to. You can love geology and anthropology and all the ologies. I've got a list of ologies somewhere.
Oleology.
It's so overwhelmingly, fantastically awe-inspiring, more awe-inspiring than any religion, don't you think? It's fantastic. The marvel, the miracle's the wrong word. The magic of reality. That was Dawkins' phrase, wasn't it?
Yeah, there's something about naturalistic explanations, and once you accept that as the chief guiding force in terms of understanding the world, you realize how much more you need to learn and how little time you've got to do it. Whereas faith, a lot of the time, to many, not everyone, but it's handing over the answers and saying no further questions, Your Honour, kind of mentality. And that's debilitating to me a little bit. I want to be able to find out more and scratch away and enrich my knowledge rather than have easy answers that can't be questioned.
It's like, if intelligent design in schools. So today's lesson is, how did the eye evolve? God did it.
Yep.
All right.
Lunch.
Have the rest of the afternoon off. It always has to come back to science, and also the question: what does it look like what did it look like in real time? If it really happened, what did it look like in real time? This clot of blood. I actually think the Qur'anic explanation could be argued, and I know some Muslims do argue, as a pretty good shot at it. Man and woman created from a clot of blood.
It is closer than clay, isn't it?
Yeah.
So
well, clay as well. Clay.
We do believe we're from clay as well. Yeah.
Yeah. That's pretty good, because it's pretty true.
What, clay?
Blood, a clot of blood. Okay, what is a clot of blood? And I know people do all sorts of, strange maneuvers to try and fit the facts. But a clot of blood could be like DNA or whatever, couldn't it?
It could certainly be the precursor to a modern sci-fi movie where they clone somebody, for sure. I mean, it is in the ballpark, isn't it? It
is the ballpark. That's the point.
Yeah,
and it's not bad that it's in the ballpark. That the question actually recently on one of the big questions about science and religion was when I asked, they had not Christian scientists, but they had, people in science who are Christians, people who are Christians who are, and they weren't loopy. They accepted science and how we evolved. And there were two of them. And one was on the screen and one was in the studio. That sounds a bit respectful. There was, oh, fucking hell, there's two of them. And, oh, God. And I said to the first one there, I hope you're having fun. And I said, look, okay, at the time, this is the first question, at the time of Jesus's birth, if he had right, we've got 24 chromosomes, but the apes have got 24 chromosomes. We've got 23 chromosomes. Chromosome 2 is forged together. It's you can see the telomeres and which are on the outside, normally in the middle. They have evolved into the centromeres, and chromosome 2's the two fused chromosomes. Fused is the word I was looking for. I was confused. I said, if you look at that, if you did a DNA test on Jesus and 23 pairs of chromosomes were, half the chromosomes were his mother, what would the reading be on the other half? And they've never thought about that. That's the real time question, isn't it? And she went, I did read something on this once. I did, and it'll come to me. I said, well, it's a big basic question. She said, and then she changed the subject. So I turned to the other guy who was a leading physicist or something like that at one of the universities. Very nice chap. He had books about Bob Dylan behind him. And I thought, yes, there's a hinterland. And he said, well, I'm no expert in biology, and then moved it on, which shows just how uncomfortable he was. I love questions like that.
You love it, don't you, Nicky?
Yeah.
Here's my question on that then. So I know what I think about this, but what's more frustrating to you? Somebody who just says, look, it's my faith. I don't need to explain it with science. It's just what I believe, and I think it's true because I have faith. Versus somebody who tries to make theology fit to our scientific understanding. Which one's more frustrating to you?
That's interesting. That's the young Earth creationist argument against theistic evolution, right? Basically. Yeah. I think that is really interesting. Mitch Benn said something on Twitter once. It's a great force on Twitter, the musician, the comedian. And he said that and he's an unremitting rationalist. He said that he respects young Earth creationists more than he would respect theistic evolutionists, because young Earth creationists at least throw everything at it. Yeah. Everything. There's no compromise.
There's a sincerity to it.
There's a sincerity to it. Everything. It's, there's no sort of, well, that happened, and you're all right, and yeah.
There's no mental gymnastics involved.
That's the phrase I was looking for on maneuverings. Mental gymnastics. No mental gymnastics involved. It's all out. But you do have mental gymnastics potentially with theistic evolution, because there's 23 different types of elephant have gone extinct. What's all that about? Think of all the extinctions and all the evolutionary dead ends and all that. But then beyond that, there's quite a good argument which trumps that, which is that of Jonathan Sacks, the former chief rabbi, in his book, which I think is pretty good. And I think if I were a Christian, I'd very much buy it. And it's what we were talking about earlier on, the beauty of science. And he said, God is a gardener, not an engineer. Basically his point was, God doesn't design mouse ears like Walt Disney. Well, he didn't say that. I was talking about the spectrum of Christianity. Something I did want to mention to both of you is something which I think you'll both find fascinating, because it's talking about it actually addresses that whole trying to accommodate your beliefs with science and with reality. Trying to meld the supernatural and the natural. So you've got this spectrum of belief, spectrum of faith in Christianity, for example, which goes all the way from the literalists. Marsupials were running away. Lot's wife turned into a pillar of salt. There was a global flood, all that baloney, all the way through to Christians who don't believe in God. And I find them really interesting. And there's a lot of them.
Christians that don't believe in God. What did I miss when I got disconnected there?
Christians who do not believe in God. Quite a lot. They've done surveys of Church of England vicars. Quite a lot of vicars in the Church of England do not believe in God. And there's the group, the Sea of Faith. I mean, I'm putting it simplistically, but there is the group, the Sea of Faith, who we had on the program a few times, who believe in the teachings of Jesus and follow Jesus and think Jesus was a great example of a human being, the way he lived, the things he said. I mean, the Sermon from the Mount is pretty bloody good. And but they don't believe in his divinity, and they don't believe in a creator.
I'm seeing a lot of this, a resurgence of this idea of traditional Christian values from people who are very secular or, don't have any belief in God. There seems to be, I suppose it's, I think you sort of touched on it when we started talking, this idea in every human of why are we all here? What's our purpose? What are the guiding forces? What are the ethical frameworks we can cling to? Where do we derive knowledge and morality? And a lot of people, younger people I'm seeing, which might be a cause for concern for some, are latching on to this idea of Christianity as the answer to a void that's been left. Certainly in the UK, I don't know if you've seen this in any form.
Not really, but the churches that are really thriving are the kind of Pentecostal churches. We had some great people on from those churches, and they're impressive. They might be, young Earth creationists, and they might have views that we would find perhaps unpalatable in a liberal society about homosexuality and so forth. But there are times, both of you, when I've just thought, wow, to have that certainty is dangerous, but it's kind of quite impressive as well. You've got certainty, you drive, you pilot planes into tall buildings, but at the same time you think, oh my God, what's it like to live like that? You kind of surf through life, right?
Yeah, I mean, so a lot of these fundamentalists do tend to be very certain about everything as well. And, you just have to wonder why it is, and is it more comforting to them? Because otherwise then you have to admit life is unpredictable. You don't know what's going to happen. Maybe we don't know everything. We don't know all the answers. That seems a bit more scary, really, doesn't it?
I think the uncomfortable truth, especially for somebody who, like me, who's an atheist, is that I have to concede that there is often comfort in falsehood, telling yourself stories that aren't true. There is a utility to it that might help you to overcome maybe grief, loss, or ambition. Perhaps might it give you that extra boost to go for something. And it's a case of how do you replace that in a secular context? Where do you draw that sort of inspiration from?
I know, but then how can grown adults believe in hell?
Yes. So that's the flip side of the coin, and certainly all the horrific things that leads to in terms of the treatment of children, etc. I mean, what I was going to ask as well, when you talked up the explanation, the Islamic explanation in the Clot of Blood before in Creation as quite a quaint one, and
I like it.
Yeah, fairly impressive.
If I was a Muslim, and if I was an explorer of science, and I know there are, Osama Hassan is one, and Inayat Banglawala is another, leading Muslims who realize actually we are an evolved species and we share a common ancestor with a chimpanzee. I would really buy that Clot of Blood thing. You can find things in the Quran which totally support evolution.
Yeah,
if you want to.
So I seem to remember a while back on one episode you ended the episode with a little wink and a nod and the phrase "Inshallah." You say, "I think we'll be in Bristol next week, Inshallah," something like that. And obviously,
that's when I knew I got him.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, you can stop emailing now.
It was because we were going to do a debate, or had done a debate about free will.
Yeah. Inshallah, just an expression for God willing, and I think 99% of the audience understood there that it was just a nice cultural reference, a relevant one. So I suppose that's leading to my larger question. I've noticed, depending on what week it is and what topics you cover, you're either a right-wing Islamophobe, or you're some sort of wishy-washy left-winger who wouldn't dare talk about Islam the way you've just questioned Christianity on your show. I mean, how tiring does that get, really? And what are people missing when they respond like that to the big questions and your work specifically?
Yeah, it does get tiring. On that particular occasion, I had 2 death threats by the time I got to the green room. Not from people who were there, but from on Twitter.
Definitely not from me.
So, and this is saying Inshallah. So we're talking about some sort of non-Muslim far right types.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I was leading the Islamification of the British media. I think that Breitbart wrote about it.
Yes.
Yeah, I remember Milo Yiannopoulos comment on it as well.
Did he?
I think he may have retweeted and proliferated the Breitbart article at the time. It was a sign of the impending collapse of the UK to the Islamification. They really ran with it. It was hysterical hyperbole, and these are the people who ostensibly claim to stand for free speech and making jokes and being playful about religion and things like that. And they heard this one expression, and all of a sudden, you were about to install Sharia law, from what I could tell.
Well, and I think I'm not sort of boasting. I think I've done as much as anyone to actually question these Islamists properly. You have on that program, and to explore their beliefs. But the whole thing is that if more and more, if you ask questions, if you explore beliefs, it's Islamophobia. Islamophobia is now just equated to I'm asking you about your faith, and I don't actually think that it's logical that you need 2 women witnesses where you only need 1 man witness. I think that's misogynistic. Oh, you don't understand. You're an Islamophobe. There's too much of that going on.
I remember you asking the MP West Streeting about this because, the all-party parliamentary group came up with a definition of Islamophobia, and they said that it's it had the word Muslimness in the definition. And you were asking him, if I say Islam is misogynistic or racist, would that be classed as Islamophobia? And I'm not sure if you got a response back on that. So just
Tom Holland was asking him as well.
Yeah.
The historian. We've just got to be very careful. These are cherished liberties that we fought a long time for, the liberty and the freedom to ridicule religion. And people say, well, you're punching down. And I say, well, you're not punching down. Are you telling me that theocracies, criticizing theocracy and everything behind theocracies is punching down? That's ridiculous, ludicrous. And I think it's so important to ridicule religion. We need to ridicule all religions. And if religion is robust enough, that's fine. It's the whole Life of Brian argument.
No one ever loses their head when you take the piss out of physics, do they? I mean,
I claim the right. There's no injunction against me not to ridicule L. Ron Hubbard. And so it's the L. Ron Hubbard argument. I said that when we had an interview on the radio about some desecration of the Prophet or some cartoon or whatever, and it was like the right to ridicule. I said to the Imam who is on, who I know is a nice guy, but I said, my first question was, so you are saying that I should not be able to ridicule L. Ron Hubbard and make fun of the beliefs of Scientology? And he kind of had nowhere to go, because he said, no, you shouldn't be able to do that. It was clearly a bonkers answer. And you should be able to do that, but you shouldn't be able to do that to my religion, was clearly a bonkers answer. So I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole, but I think it's important that we fight for this one, because the debate on the burqa is an interesting one as well. We've done debates on the burqa. We have had robust conversations about the niqab and the burqa, and these are robust conversations and criticisms that are voiced within many Muslim communities by Muslims I know, who would say of the burqa exactly the same that Boris Johnson said of the burqa. But of course, it's more comfortable if it comes from them than it comes from Boris Johnson, given his culture and given what he is and given who he is. But it's that hugely patronizing thing that all Muslims think the same. They do not. They all have different views. And you know this better than anyone, Iram, but Salafis is kind of seen by many as a cult within a religion, isn't it? And I know so many Muslims who are of faith and who are practicing, who loathe these people.
Yeah, I mean, lots of mainstream Muslims always talk about how much they hate the Saudi influence of Wahhabism or Salafi Muslims who take everything really literally and just want to erase all culture. And when you were talking about the veil earlier, I mean, pretty much everyone in my own family hates the veil as well. So are we being Islamophobic now for hating it? It's just not something that is normal within our culture even as well. If I go back to my grandparents' village, I won't see anybody covering their face like that. They just think it's totally bizarre. I remember when I went, God, it was like over 10 years ago, and we were driving to the main city. We were still in the village, but we were in this minivan, and we saw this woman in a full-on black niqab, and we all just went really silent. We just stared at her, and I just went, oh my God, have we ever seen something like that before in this village? And one of my relatives said, oh God, it's going to spread over here as well, because we're used to, when we go to cities, because you have more outside influences in cities, don't you? So you will see some women wearing niqabs, not a lot, but you definitely see more there than in a village. So yeah, it's even alien for even my family. So are we being Islamophobic for not liking it?
Yes. Well,
but my point was, I was just finish that point, because that's fascinating what you say there, Iram. But my point is that a few years ago, we would have done a debate on the niqab or the burqa quite comfortably. We would have aired those views. We would have heard from Muslim men and women who can't abide it and were quite rude about it. We would have heard from ex-Muslims. We would have heard from white liberals, who the whole spectrum. I've done debates with people there in the burqa. They can't, of course, answer the question as to why they have to cover up, but men don't. Men merely have to be modest. We could have done that a few years ago, and it would have been great. And burqa debates always rated well in naked TV terms, naked. And
I had something completely different.
If we did it now, I'm just talking a difference between 4 or 5 years, I think there would be a hell of a stooshy about it.
It is. You can't really criticize anything now. Before, somebody could easily come and say, you know what, this isn't even a mainstream practice. Hardly anybody does this. It's a minority thing. It's imported by Salafi, Wahhabi interpretation of Islam. And now it's a case of, we have to celebrate diversity, even if that means, the oppression of women. And you have to see what's going on in Afghanistan at the moment right now.
Yeah, exactly.
Where women are being forced to wear it. And that's erasing all their culture.
But I know that if we did that debate now, I'd go off there and I would be accused of Islamophobia on Twitter for the next 2 weeks, as opposed to leading the Islamification of the media. I just think that there's a kind of an unwillingness to accept what we used to debate, because people do not like hearing the opinions of others. I must just tell you a quick story. It's the people say, why do you have Anjem Choudhary and Tommy Robinson on the program? Well, we didn't have them a lot. We had them on occasion that was editorially justified. If you're discussing extremism, you've got to have extremists on, really, to do a proper debate. And we had them both on occasion. And there was one time that we didn't have Anjem Choudhary, but we had some of his boys on. So young guys, in the gear, who, and this is a classic example. That's a good thing to finish on. It's a classic example of people being confronted with their own beliefs and people expressing those beliefs and holding those beliefs in a small circle of people, and not being in any way troubled by critical thinking, the critical thinking of others, or having those beliefs properly examined. Just they're in that little silo. They're basically in a room together. And they're in their own echo chamber, and that's what they believe. So these boys, these young guys, who should have been, smoking weed and listening to hip hop, but they were kind of listening to lies, burning books and listening to lies and all that stuff. And they were in there as a sort of radical Islamist in the debate about Islamism or freedom of speech. I can't remember what it was. And I went out to one of the other debates was about football. Has football become immoral? Something like that. The morality of money in football. And I came out to these guys in hospitality. All right, fellas, how you doing? All right, yeah. So I'll bring you in any other debates you want to be a part of, and that'd be great. The other debate we're doing is about football. Do you like football? Any guy? No. No. You show too much flesh. It's too much flesh. So, okay. Yeah, well, you think, legs. And I said, great. I said, what about, if the Sharia law in this country, what would you do with the football stadiums, like the Arsenal Emirates Stadium and Old Trafford? And one of them said, well, we'd use them for public executions, and chopping hands off as punishment. There'd be punishment centers, so people could go along and crowd in and watch executions. And I went, oh, yeah. You should say that. And that's a really, really good point, because people are going to think, what will become of these stadia? It's really interesting that you can actually do a check on morality and get people in there and watch the amputations and the executions. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
So stitched him right up, then, football is what you mean.
Yeah, but not if he says that and if he thinks that, it should be aired.
I agree. Yeah.
And so halfway through the football debate, said, blah, 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 what are you at the stadium in your world? And he came out with it. And of course, he was then in a situation where there was people like, oh, I couldn't believe what he'd said. And there were some people were laughing, some people were horrified. And I remember looking into the guy's face, and he'd never, ever been in a situation that had so many people questioning what he'd been told. And I thought, maybe he might reflect a little bit on that. No?
You never know, because it depends on his age as well. If he was quite young, this might have been someone who's very impressionable, got lured into a group that was run by someone very, very charismatic like Anjem Choudhary. who gave him all the answers. And this is somebody who's probably feeling very uncertain about life and the future. And you have someone like Anjem Choudhary telling him, this is life, this is what we should believe, X, Y, and Z. And of course, everyone else was going to have the same views. And then being brought into the studio and having his views challenged. And it could have started something. I mean, I don't know who this person is. A quick Google, maybe he ended up, I don't know, being convicted of something. I don't know. He's probably gone off to Afghanistan or something, but you never know. I think if you're saying that he didn't expect that kind of response, maybe that's what he needed. Somebody,
because he'd never been in that situation before, that people would actually have that kind of response. Because he'd only ever been with the rest of the lads, you know.
It's one hell of a way to stress test your ideas, though, isn't it? Wow.
Maybe Nicky Campbell should run the Prevent program or channel, de-radicalize all these extremists.
But if we respect all beliefs, why not have public executions at Upton Park? Oh no, they're not at Upton Park anymore, or wherever. You know, it's unbelievable.
That flew by. Nicky, thank you very much for giving up your time to speak to us. Is there anything else you are desperate to get out before I let you get back to your evening? I appreciate you having an early start.
I want to know now, are you going to revive Wheel of Fortune?
No, I was bloody years. This taxi, what is it?
I loved Wheel of Fortune.
1995, I stopped it as well. And I was in a taxi the other day, and he said, you're not on television anymore, are you? I don't see you on the television. I said, well, I do the big questions. And
he doesn't wake up at 10 a.m.
I do Long Lost Family, which is a thing we do, which is with 12 years, an amazing program. And I just said this thing of Channel 5, blah, blah, blah. He went, oh, yeah. I don't watch television, so I've not seen you.
Can I just say, my granddad's in his 90s now, and I don't talk to my family much about my podcast and my blogging, not for any reason. I just don't like to bore people. I kind of think that they're probably not interested as much, but every year or so when I see, or every time I visit my granddad, he always brings up that time I was on the TV. So he's very proud of me being on The Big Questions. He always mentions it and talks about that time Nicky Campbell was asking you questions on the telly. So you've got another fan there in my granddad.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah, I had to lock the door so my mum wouldn't video bomb and say hi.
Well, I know you'd be interested. You two guys are brilliant at this. And I know you'd be, because I know we're interested in the same stuff, basically. We're interested in belief and literalism and hypocrisy and double standards and the rational and the irrational. And I think what's happening in student unions as well. I don't know if it's quite as bad as it's painted sometimes, but I remember we did go to one campus and we were talking about free speech, and the leader of the student union was there. And I said in the audience, and I said, okay, let me give it. Would you have Nigel Farage to speak? No. I mean, of course we wouldn't have him. The protest, we wouldn't have him. And then, oh yeah. Okay, would you have Aung San Suu Kyi to speak? Yeah, fascinating. Yeah, you do realise she's complicit in genocide. You know, it's that double standard, which I think it's great to explore.
Which university was that?
Can't remember.
I think I remember that. They banned Nigel Farage as a speaker as well. They kind of doubled down on that.
But not Aung San Suu Kyi.
Yeah.
I think they had done Farage and they'd banned him. But Aung San Suu Kyi would be, well, they'd roll out the red carpet. It's interesting, isn't it?
It is madness how, I mean, it's about principles, isn't it? Where do you draw the line in terms of people's views and who you platform and how quickly you throw them principles out the window, whether or not it's politically expedient to do so?
I mean, Nigel Farage is many things, but I don't think he's ever been involved with the military junta in Myanmar.
I don't think he's ever been complicit in
carrying out genocide.
Yeah.
I'll check. Can anyone get his wiki up? We'll have a look. That's absolutely right.
Give it a Google.
He was very nice in person. I had to interview him once. He knows how to answer your question. Very polite, not rude. Sorry to disappoint. He didn't punch me in the face.
I get the feeling he smells of cigarette and stale beer.
I don't wish to comment
Aromatic burps.
and not aromatic.
Do you think there's any aromatic burps from Nigel?
Possibly. I will. It'll certainly be on his Wikipedia entry by the end of this discussion for sure. Oh, this has been fun. This has been fascinating. I've really enjoyed it.
All right, speak soon. Keep up the good work on Twitter. Thanks for all your support, and God bless you both.